Be me. 2019. Find drain tunnel near friend's house. Try to explore. Get in maybe 100 feet before it's pitch black. Go to friend's house. Hey bro, wanna come explore this cool drain with me? Sorry Anon, I'm scared by this kind of thing. You can have my headlamp though. Thanks bro, see ya. Return to tunnel. Sun is setting. Head inside, observing surroundings. The deeper into the tunnel, the older the graffiti on the walls, mostly from the 70s and having to do with weed and sex. MFW boomers got high and fucked where I'm standing. Try to ignore that fact and keep moving. Walk for 10 more minutes. Long fucking tunnel.png. Notice walls have been barren for the past 3 minutes. Keep walking. More graffiti comes into view. It looks pretty creepy, probably tagged by some edgy kids 30 years ago to scare people. Don't think too much of it. Been walking for 30 minutes now. Should probably head back. Walk back. Get to a wall. The wall is blocking what would have been the entrance/exit. Made of concrete. Looks like it's been there for decades. No possible way I could have made a wrong turn. It's all one tube. Trapped in the tunnel. Have to head back down to find a way out. Son of a bitch.jpg. Turn around. Start walking. Walk until the occult symbols again. Hear something behind me. Pick related. Hear multiple appendages/legs splashing around. Clear, light breathing coming from it. Take picture because I had my phone out trying to get service. It blinks after I take the picture. Lurches forward. Do a 180 and make tracks. Sprint for a good 10 minutes. Muscles dying, lungs burning, throat dry as the Sahara. Eventually see outlet. Sweetfreedom.mov, escape the tunnel, collapse into a puddle of stagnant water and tadpoles, walk to friend's house, cold, wet, and tired. Never go back.
Reverse image search. Multiple reverse image search sites. No hits.
Be Me, 16. Urban exploration with a QT 3.14 friend. Find this really small 2-story house dilapidated as fuck. Doors are boarded up, windows are boarded up. See small window that leads into basement. We're both thin-framed enough to slide in. Basement must be bigger than first floor. Hobo cot in the corner. Porn mags, canned food and all. Should we leave Anon? I don't want to get hobo knifed. Cot is covered in dust. Everything is covered in dust. No, I think we're good. Initiate flashlights. Basement is creepy, but otherwise empty and smells like rancid shit. Literal bucket of shit. Flies and mold and disgusting, I almost vomit. We go up the stairs into the house. Inside of house isn't dusty, but is dark. Explore all like 700 square feet. Living room and kitchen combo, bathroom, that's it. Bathroom is locked really tightly. Whatever. Living room looks really nice for an abandoned house. Kinda creepy, to be honest. Feel like someone's watching us. Go upstairs. Anon, can we go? I want to see the rest of the place, then we can leave. Promise. Upstairs is 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Weird, rotten kind of smell. Open first bedroom door, completely empty. Open second bedroom, also empty, but has big stains on carpet and ripped up wallpaper. We open bathroom door together. Olfactory sensory overload. Dead skinned squirrels and cats all over counter. Small skinned dog in toilet. Dried blood all over floor. Bundle of cloth in bathtub. Morbid curiosity is taking over. 4 red spots in cloth about 2 inches wide each. Hand shaking as I reach for the end of the cloth. Anon, please, can we go? Move the cloth. Dead blonde girl with smeared makeup eyes wide open, mouth is gagged. Friend screams, I scream. We run down the hall, notice bedroom doors closed. I didn't close any of these doors. Run down the stairs, friend is still screaming. Previously locked bathroom door is open. See knives and such in there, and a chair facing the door. Another bolt of cloth in that tub. Bathroom door slams shut. Friend screams louder, heads straight for the basement to leave. I hear her leave. Can't move, too scared. House is completely silent. Hear door upstairs creaking. Fear paralysis gone. Run to the basement, Climb out tiny window. Friend is there, crying and shaking. We're just outside the window. Suddenly hear bam, bam, bam. I jump. She jumps and screams. Tiny window is suddenly boarded up. Nope. .jpg. We run back to her car in the driveway. There's a folded up note under the wiper. I grab it on my way to the passenger seat. We start driving home. I open note. We've seen your faces. Call the police and we come for you. I scream. She sees note. Breaks down crying. Never told anyone before. Not making this up. Stay the fuck out of San Antonio, seriously.
I've got something fresh. You guys should appreciate this. Years ago, when I was 16 in high school. Live in not quite a city, more like an old town that expanded more than it could really support. Decent amount of rundown and abandoned buildings. Get into a kind of urban exploration kick, sneaking into places and checking them out. Occasionally engage in minor looting. Sometimes you find neat stuff. Managed to talk a few friends into coming with me sometimes, but only 3 are relevant for this story. One was an old buddy of mine, who I'll be calling Bill, and another was a girl I had a minor crush on, who I'll call Susan. The last one is the most important. He told us his name was Eli, and there's probably not much point in censoring anything for him. Bill, Susan, and I all went to the same school, but I met Eli while I was checking out some old restaurant. Spooked the hell out of me, because I had just snuck in through a window and he speaks up from right fucking behind me. He thought it was funny as hell. We get to talking. I tell him about my hobby and ask if he's doing something similar. Yeah, more or less. I like to keep an eye out for unusual things. Or things that don't belong. Okay, seems kinda weird, but he's friendly, and I'm running around scavenging junk in a half-wrecked diner or whatever, so I can't talk. We chat for a bit. Turns out Eli doesn't go to my school, which explains why I've never seen him around before. He listens more than he talks and doesn't volunteer much info about himself, but I don't want to pry too much, and he seems all right. We clamber back out. I startle a cat that was sitting by the window. Eli pets before it runs off. Part on good terms. A week or so later, I'm hanging out with Bill, showing him this old 3-story apartment building or motel or something, planning the expedition like we're getting away with the heist of the century. Suddenly, still exploring? Jesus fuck Eli from behind me again. Bill actually jumps and I laugh at him like I hadn't nearly soiled myself. Introduce the two. They seem to hit it off well enough. Ask Eli if he wants to come with us to explore the place Friday night. He just kinda looks at me for a second, then tilts his head and stares at the building. Good 10 seconds of silence. Yeah, might be a good idea. Neat. Friday night rolls around. I managed to talk Susan into coming with us. So it's me, Bill and her, and Eli when he finally shows up. I'm watching this time, you bastard. Not again. He casually strolls down the street in plain view with his hands in his pockets. He's grinning at me. He knows I was expecting another jump scare. Whatever, I introduce him to Susan. We're all friends now. Let's rock. So it's about 7 p.m. Still got some light out. We're standing outside the place. Building is kind of a dilapidated and boarded up, but shouldn't be too dangerous to wander around in. And we've all got flashlights. Also apparently a nesting ground for stray cats, because I can see 3 of them sitting in what was probably an old flower bed or something, and another just darted under the front steps. The front is still locked up, but there's a side door that doesn't properly close anymore. It looks like it used to be boarded up, but that had rotted off. I may have helped it along. So we enter the building. This was a bad idea. The place is mostly normal. Old, dirty, has that slight, moldy, decrepit wreck smell all abandoned places tend to have. We wander around the ground floor a bit. Nothing really interesting. It's mostly just a lobby. Figure we might find something more interesting on the 2nd or 3rd floors. That's where the rooms are. The 3 of us are joking around, but Eli's pretty quiet. Whenever we go into a room, he'd just kind of stare into it from the doorway, then pace around the walls. Whatever works for him, I guess. The rooms are all empty, though. Guess they cleared the place out pretty good when they left it. Only thing we saw was a few more cats darting down the halls. We look around for maybe 30 minutes before deciding to call it quits. Not a bad time, but I'm a little disappointed we didn't find someone's old luggage full of plus-size ballerina outfits or something. So we head down the stairs and keep going down the stairs. Conversation peters off. Why are there so many steps here? Did we get turned around and go down the wrong stairwell somehow? Maybe we're coming out at the basement, starting to smell kind of funky, probably some nasty mold down there. But there's the door, so let's see where it goes. Eli hasn't said anything for the last 10 minutes. Turns out to be another hallway of rooms. The four of us are standing by the stairwell looking down the hall. Kind of confused, subterranean apartments are kind of an odd choice. We decide to go back up and find the right stairs again. Eli is at the base of stairs looking up. I ask him what's up and look where he's looking. Something is standing at the top of the alcove. My first reaction is that we're about to get shanked by a drunken homeless man. Then things start registering. It's big but kind of squashed and wide, like if a person was stretched out from the sides, and its legs are even more disproportionately short and stumpy. What I thought was a really grimy coat is actually long, tangled, really ratty-looking hair or fur covering its body. Can't even see any eyes, just hair. There's a mouth, though. I can tell because it starts screaming at us. The mouth is too wide, it looks like it starts on the side of its head, and there aren't any teeth, just thick lips and spittle. I almost would have preferred shark teeth or something. There was just something really revolting about the gaping empty mouth. The noise itself was just fucking terrifying. I can't even describe it other than to say it's not a sound that a person could make. Like it went into my ear and started throttling the caveman, part of your brain that identifies threats. It started to stagger down towards us, still screaming. We were all screaming, except Eli, who was shoving me back into the hallway and manhandling the others into running. We didn't need much encouragement. We're sprinting as fast as we fucking can down a dark corridor with God knows what screeching behind us. It's not very fast, but we can hear it chasing us with uneven stomps. The flashlights help, but we're moving so spastically, it's throwing crazy shadows all over the place, which does not help our state of mind. There's another stairwell on the other side of hall. If we can go back up, we can find the way out. Except it only goes down. There's no fucking up staircase, just a wall. Susan's sobbing by now. I'm not far off myself. Eli shoves us forward again so we don't stop moving, and we go down. The hallway down here goes forward a lot farther than the other floors. The ceiling is a lot higher than it seems it should be for how far down we went. That rancid smell from earlier is a lot worse, and we can hear the thing half tumbling down the stairs after us. I'm about to start running again when Eli sprints past us towards one of the doors and wrenches it open. In! It's safer! I guess we're hiding. No one argues, probably because we're all still so freaked out, we'll take even slightly helpful direction at this point. We run into the room. I almost freeze up because there's something in there with us. It's another cat. Eli's standing in front of the door, holding it closed. No one moves, no one even breathes. Hear the thing gurgle and scream and gallop towards our room. Then from farther away, a loud feline yowl, then several more. The thing roars again and we hear it go past us. I'm looking at the cat sitting in the middle of the floor. It's staring at Eli. A few seconds go by and he quietly opens the door again. The stairs are just fucking gone. It's hallway in both directions. One of us is making a high-pitched whimpering noise. I'm not sure who, but I wouldn't rule out any of us right now. Stressful doesn't quite cover it. The screaming's coming back. I think to go back into the room again, but Eli's already moving down the hall. The cat's following him. Susan goes after him. So does Bill. I hesitate by the first room for a second, torn between hiding in there again and making another run for it in the open. Decide I don't want to be alone more than I want to be in that room, and I run after them. I nearly freak the fuck out when something brushes my leg. It's another cat running beside me, not hurting me, just ignore it. Eli's ushering Susan and Bill into another room ahead of me. I see them hesitate for a second before entering. Eli's staring at me now, holding the door open. I hear the scream again. I run through the doorway and stumble to a stop as Eli closes behind me. Bill and Susan are there, and so are the cats, like dozens of them. The room's full of them. Bill's just standing there twitching, and I can hear him repeating, "Fuck, fuck, fuck, fuck," very quietly. Susan's sitting on the floor, half curled into a ball. There's a circle of cats standing around them. Some of them are watching them, but the others are staring out into the room. All the other cats are either stalking around or sitting and staring into space. Getting freaked out again, this is not normal behavior. Hey, and then there's Eli, who is much too calm for this situation and has somehow acquired a platoon of disturbingly focused alley cats. Seriously, there's maybe 6 of them at his sides and his back following his steps. Stay here. You'll be okay. I'll make it stop. Too fucking panicked to question him. Also don't really know what the hell he's pulling with the cats and suddenly don't want him focusing on me. Susan proves she has bigger balls than me and manages to ask him what's happening. When he looks at her, so do all the cats following him at the same time. What the fuck, Eli? Stay. You're safe with us. I'll come back. And then he walks out with his cat followers and closes the door behind him. The cats apparently left to guard us deliberately open a path for me to stand next to Bill and Susan. So I stand with them. They circle us again. Not sure how long we sat there. My sense of time was pretty screwed by then. Then finally there was a new sound. Except I didn't really hear it. It was more like I could feel the vibration. Like it was very, very loud, but too low a pitch for me to hear. Made my hair stand on end and my whole body just locked up. Every damn cat is standing up and staring in the same direction. Ears back, tails down, eyes wide and huge and reflective. It stops after maybe half a minute, and the cats suddenly act like normal cats again. The ones circling us get up and wander around. A minute later, Eli abruptly walks back in. He looks fine, not a scratch on him, but he's lightly splattered with a disturbingly viscous, pitch-black liquid, except for his right arm, which is coated up to the elbow with the stuff. I don't want to know. I do not want to know. The cats start filtering out the door. We can go now. I don't really have a lot of clarity for a bit afterwards. I vaguely remember walking, then running out of the building. Everything was normal again. The exit was easy to find. Bill booked it the second he was outside. No looking back. A couple cats followed him, though. Susan and I stood outside with Eli for a few minutes. She tried asking him what happened again, but he just shrugged and said not to worry, he took care of it. If I wasn't still so terrified, I'd have been pissed at not getting an actual answer. We all went home. Eli walked back some of the way with me. Susan got another entourage of cats. We didn't talk about anything else, and when I could see my house, I felt Eli pat me on the shoulder from behind. He was just gone when I turned around. When Susan and I talked about it a few days later, she swore he'd walked home with her and that I had walked off with a cat party. Shit, skipped a bit. Meant to go right before. Needless to say, the urban exploration fucking stopped. We never saw Eli again. I looked around a little, but I wasn't sure I wanted to find him. Susan did, though. Holy shit, did she want to find him. Pretty sure she put up missing person posters at some point. Okay, now I'm done. Pretty sure she put up missing person posters at some point. No luck, though. Torpedoed any chance I had with her. Eli was all she talked about. Bill refused to discuss it at all. Didn't even want to talk to me or Susan much. Think he was trying to put as much distance between him and that night as possible. He picked up a drug habit a couple months afterwards, and from what little I got him to talk to me about it, he'd apparently retroactively decided that night was just a hallucination from bad weed or whatever. Despite him never having touched the stuff until well after everything went down, and all 3 of us having the same experience when I'd never taken drugs in my life, and Susan definitely hadn't. Self-delusion's a hell of a thing. Back in the present, moved the hell out of that town. So did Bill. Susan's still there. We still talk semi-regularly. She works at an animal shelter. She owns 3 cats. I don't have any room to judge. When I was looking to move out to my own apartment, the first thing I asked the landlords was their policy on pets. I bought a cat the first day I moved in. Bill actually left the state entirely. Still won't acknowledge weird anything happened back then. We still don't talk much these days, but once when I spoke to him on the phone, he admitted that he keeps cats as well. 6 of them. So to sum everything up, I was attacked by eldritch hobo Bigfoot, then rescued and cock-blocked by a magical cat boy. Thanks, Eli, you son of a bitch.
Hey slash X slash I'm not from here. I'm a slash mu slash mutant who only comes here for the occasional creepy pasta thread. I'm not too into the paranormal and have never believed in ghosts or aliens or any of that sort of stuff. I live in Oak Park, just outside of Chicago, Illinois. See, we have an ordinance here where you're not allowed to put up a for sale sign in front of a house. So many homes are vacant here that they'd be absolutely everywhere if we could put them up, so in order to ensure people want to live here, we make it so it doesn't look like nobody wants to live here. Thus, no for sale signs. I live alone with my pet cat, an all-black cat which I found out recently is a rarity. His name is Calvin. He was the runt of the litter. This isn't really important. The story all started about 2 months ago. That's when I first got up late at night after a bad dream and went out for a cigarette and saw my neighbor from directly across the street was sitting in front of his large, bright television, which was facing right out his window at my house. I did not think anything of it. As days went on, I kept looking out my window and seeing my neighbor just sitting there watching TV. After 2 weeks, I came to the conclusion that he could very well be dead. It just didn't make sense that he was just sitting there, TV on, not leaving the couch for weeks. I could only see the back of his head, and he very well may have moved while I was at work. But knowing it was there, the light of his television kept me up at night, and for hours on end, there would just be no movement. I came to the conclusion that I should call the police to ask if they could check up on my neighbor. I didn't know him very well, we met twice. He was an older guy. I used to see him shoveling snow or raking leaves, and I offered to help, and he said no both times. He was a fairly active guy for his age, and it didn't add up that he'd just sit there for days watching TV and not leaving his house. So I called the police and told them, and they offered to check it out. I saw them pull up and couldn't help but watch. I was very curious, and even though I thought all that would happen was they'd call up an ambulance or something and remove my neighbor's dead body, not something I'd usually be extremely interested in watching, I had grown so curious about what was going on over there that I couldn't settle for the simple answer that my neighbor simply died in front of his television. After knocking a few times, I saw them open up the front door and walk in. They looked around. One of them left the living room, so I couldn't see where he'd gone. I could only see the one room where my neighbor's windows were. The one officer turned off the television and also left my sight. They both left and drove off. About 20 minutes later, I got a call explaining that the house was empty and my neighbor had moved out. They said a real estate agent had probably just accidentally left the television on. I went on to a few real estate websites, and as it were, the house was indeed for sale. Anticlimactic, but at least it was a far less morbid conclusion than I'd expected. I was sort of embarrassed that my mind had immediately gone to death when it really was so bland and simple, and I felt like a pretty bad person for actually feeling a slight sense of disappointment when I found out my neighbor hadn't died as I'd assumed. That was a reasonable answer, a totally logical one. I had no way of knowing without the real estate signs up front, and I had no reason to question it. My neighbor had moved out, plain and simple. When I went to bed that night, it had pretty much entirely left my head. My bedroom window faces out towards my neighbor's house. For the last 2 weeks, I had been watching the television from my bed. It was how I went to sleep, just confusedly staring in wonder, slightly disturbed knowing I could be looking at the back of the head of my dead neighbor. And since I'd been staring at that television for the last 2 weeks, it took a few minutes to register the horror when I crawled into bed and looked at the television, still on across the street. I didn't sleep very well. Every night for about a month and a half, I'd just see that television. During the day it was on. I'd walk up to the house when I was feeling more adventurous and knock on the door, but nobody answered. I started smoking quite a bit in lieu of proper sleep. Every night I'd walk by the house, curious, scared, and confused. I contacted the realtor and asked if they were giving tours, and she said they were not, so it didn't get turned on during some open house. I thought maybe I was hallucinating that the television was never on, but the officer definitely went over and turned it off, so it had absolutely been on, at least in the first place. I invited a friend over 2 weeks ago, and after a little hanging out, I told him the story and asked, straight-faced and horrified, if the television was on. He said that it was. He was clearly concerned for my health, and I don't blame him. So the only other option I could think of was that maybe a squatter had taken up residence in the vacant house. It wasn't common in the area, as far as I knew. There's very little crime or homelessness in the suburban area I live in, so it didn't really make any sense for somebody to squat here, but it was all I could think of. Last night, I worked up the courage to confront this squatter. I was going to call the police, but assuming the squatter had been there when I first called, I doubted it would do anything to tell them again. I worked it out in my head that as long as somebody else was living in that house illegally, it wasn't so bad for me to walk over and enter uninvited myself. Stupidly, I worked up this courage while smoking a cigarette late at night, where the only light out was the light pollution over to the east in Chicago and the dim light of the street lamps. Shaking, both from the terrible cold weather we've been having lately and from the nervousness taking over, I opened the door. I was hoping the door was locked so I could back down on my sudden wave of courage and walk away without feeling like I was just running off with my tail between my legs. To my surprise and dismay, the door was not locked. I felt briefly confused, wondering why the realtor hadn't put in a lock like they did when I sold my house. But I realized that if there was somebody squatting here, then it shouldn't come as a surprise that there wasn't exactly airtight security. Slowly, timidly, I walked towards the living room. I could hear the faint murmur or infomercials and see the moving lights and colors of the screens shine as I tiptoed, trying to make as little noise as possible. My whole body went cold as I entered the room. There was my squatter, a middle-aged woman, wrinkly, gray-haired, and dressed like a homeless person. It at least added up. I was more horrified of the fact that I had to now confront them than at the woman herself. I stuttered a scared hello, and she looked at me, and before I could form a thought, she screamed the most hellish, horrifying scream I've ever heard. It was not the scream of a middle-aged woman. It was demonic, deep, and ear-splitting. I froze up and my heart sank and my eyes widened and I stared, accepting that I was going to die at this screaming woman for what seemed like eternity. It was an unwavering scream. It didn't sound like she was losing her breath after what had to have been a whole minute. The moment the initial wave of shock wore off, I just turned and ran. She hadn't moved save for turning to look at me as she screamed, and I looked to make sure she hadn't gotten up to follow me out, and she had not. I ran to my house. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to explain the situation or risk getting myself into legal trouble for trespassing on my neighbor's property, and if they went there and again did not find the squatter, there was no question that I'd be seen as completely insane. I lay awake, refusing to look across the street at the television screen, and my thoughts raced. Surely it had to have just been a squatter. She looked like one. She was clearly living in a house that wasn't hers. She was probably a mentally unstable homeless woman. I decided the scream couldn't have been as awful as I had thought. It was all just the makings of a scared mind. I actually managed to get some sleep, shockingly enough, and when I woke up, I briefly didn't even remember what had happened the night before. What I woke up to was somewhat odd. My cat always sleeps downstairs in the living room on the sofa, but I found him wide awake, sitting on my bed cleaning himself. In all my years living here, I never woke up with him in my room. I pet him for a little and went downstairs. As I began remembering the events of the previous night, I decided to go out for a cigarette, and on my way out I found that my front door had been unlocked. I ran through last night in my head, and I remembered vividly my frantic run-home ending in me making sure all my doors were locked. My memory is very rarely faulty. I felt my stomach churn and my heart sink, and I felt a chill as I walked back upstairs to go to my living room. What I found would have been entirely mundane in any other setting. My television set was on. I called the police to explain the situation. I called out of work, and I'm spending the next few days in my friend's home with my laptop and my cat.